Hello everyone, it's John Smith here. Today I'm going to, I had this idea for a while where instead of reading to the child, I could record a video of the child. This isn't meant for anyone but the child listening to it. If you want to use it as background noise, go ahead, I guess. Okay. So I'm going to read The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Graham. Chapter 1. The Riverbank. The mole had been working very hard all morning, spring cleaning his first home. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs, with a brush and a pair of whitewash, till he had the dust in the throat and eyes, and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur, and an aching back of weary arms. Spring was moving in, air above, and in the earth below, and around him, pretending even his dark and lowly little house, with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. It was a small wonder then, and he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor and said, "Brother!" and "Oh, blow!" and also, "Hang spring cleaning!" and bottled out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling him imperiously, and he made for the steep little tunnel, which answered in his case to the gravelled carriage dive owned by animals whose residences are nearer to the sun and air. So he scraped and scratched and scribbled and screwed, and then he screwed again, and scrabbled and scratched and scraped, working busily with his little paws and muttering to himself, "Up we go, till a last pop. His snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than the whitewashing." The sunshine struck hot on his fur. Soft breezes caressed his heated brow, and after seclusion of the cellarage he had lived in for so long, and carol of happy birds fell on his dull hearing almost like a shout, jumping off all his 4 legs at once, in joy of living and the delight of spring without its cleaning. He pursued his way across the meadow, till he reached the hedge on the further side. Hold up, said an elderly rabbit at the gap. "6 pence for the privilege of passing by the river by the private road," he said. He was bowled over in an instant by the impatient and the contemptuous mole, who trotted along the side of the hedge, chaffing the other rabbits as they peebled hurriedly from other holes to see what Roe was about. Onion sauce, he remarked jeeringly, and was gone before they could think of a thoroughly satisfactory reply. Then all started grumbling at, well, How stupid you are! Why didn't you tell him? Well, why didn't you say? He might have reminded him. And so on, in the usual way. But of course, it was then much too late, as it always was the case. It seemed too good to be true. Hither and thinner, through the meadows, as he rambled busily along the hedgerows, across the copses, finding everywhere birds building, flowers budding, leaves thrusting, everything happy and progressive and occupied, and instead of having an uneasy conscience pricking him and whispering, "Whitewash," he was somehow could only feel how jolly it was to be only idle dog among all these busy citizens. After all, the best part of the holiday is perhaps not so much to be resting yourself as it's to see other fellows busy working. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood at the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life he had seen a river before, this sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripped things with a gurgle, and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and whirls, chatter and bubble. The mole was bewildered, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river he trotted as one trots, with a very small by side to side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories, and when the tired at last, he sat on the bank, while the river still chanted on him, a babbling procession of the stories in the world sent from the heart of earth, to be told at last in the insatiable sea. As he sat on the grass and looked across the river, a dark hole in the bank opposite was just above the water's edge, caught his eye, and dreamily he felt to considering what a nice sunk dwelling place it would make for an animal with few wants and founds of the bijou riverside, residence above flood level and a remote from the noise and dust. As he heard a gaze, something bright and small seemed to twinkle down in its heart of it, vanish, then twinkle once more like a tiny star. But it hardly could be a star in such an unlikely situation, and it was too glimmering and small for a glowworm. Then, as he looked, it winked at him, and so declared itself to be an eye, and a small face began gradually to grow up around it, like a framed picture, a brown little face with whiskers, a grave, round face with the same twinkle in its eye that had first attracted this notice. Small, neat ears and sickly hair. It was the water rat. The two animals stood and regarded each other curiously. "Hello, mole," said the water rat. "Hello, rat," said the mole. Would you like to come over?" inquired the rat. Presently, "Oh, it's all very well to talk," said the mole. Rather pettishly, he began to the new river and riverside life and its ways. The rat said nothing, but stopped and phased a rope and hauled it on. Then lightly stepped into a little boat which the mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for two animals, and the mole, whole heart, went out at once, even though he did not yet fully understand its uses. The rat scullied across and made fast. Then he held up his forepaw, and the mole stepped gently down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now, then, step lively." And the mole, to his surprise and rapture, found himself seated stern on a real boat. This has been a wonderful day," he said, as the rat shoved off and sculls again. Do you know, I've never been in a boat before in my life." "What?" cried the rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... You never... Well, What have you been doing then?" It is so nice as all that," asked the mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe. It was leant back in the seat and surveyed the cushions and oars and the rope locks and the fascinating fittings and the nice felt the boat sway lightly under him. "Nice? It's the only thing," said the water rat solemnly, as he leant forwards for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolute nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing around in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily. "Messing about in boats. Messing..." Look ahead, rat," cried the mole. Suddenly, it was too late. The boat struck the bank in full tilt. The dreamer, the joyous oarsman, lay on his back at the bottom of the boat, his heels in the air. About in boats, or with boats. The rat went on composedly, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. In or out of him, it doesn't really matter. Nothing seems really to want. That's the charm of it. Whether you get away or whether you don't. Whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else. Or whether you never get anywhere at all. You're always so busy and you never do anything in particular. And when you've done it, there's always something else to do. And you can never do if you like. But if you'd much better not. Look here. If you really nothing else on hand this morning, suppose we drop down the river together and have a long day of it. The mole wagged his toes from sheer happiness, spread in his chest with full content, leaned back blissfully into the soft cushions. What a day I'm having, he said. Let us start at once. Hold on a minute then, said the rat. He looped the painter through the ring. In his land stage, climbed up into the hole above, and after a short interval, repeated staggering under the fat wicker luncheon basket. Shove that other, your feet, he observed to the mole, and he passed down into the boat. He untied the painter and took the skulls again. What's inside it? Asked the mole, wriggling with curiosity. There's a cold chicken inside it, replied the rat briefly. Well, cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, cold picketed French sandwich, put it a minute into the water. Oh, stop, cried the mole. This is too much. Do you really think so? Inquired the rat seriously. It's only what I always take on a little excursion. The other animals are always telling me that I mean beast, and cud is very fine. The mole had never heard a word he was saying, and absorbed in the new life he was entering upon, the intoxicated with a sparkle, the ripple, the scents, and the sounds of the sunlight he trailed a paw in the water, and dreamed long walking dreams. The water rat, like him, like the good little fellow he was, scurried steadily and forebore to disturb him. I like your clothes awfully, old chap, he remarked, after some half an hour had passed. I'm going to get a black velvet suit someday. Myself, someday. As soon as I can afford it. I beg your pardon? Said the mole, pulling himself together with an effort. You must think me very rude, but all this is new to me, so this is a river. The river, corrected a rat. And you really live by the river. What a jolly life. By it, and with it, and on it, and in it, said the rat. It's brother and sister to me, and aunts and company, food and drink, and, naturally, washing. It's my world, and I don't want it any other way. What it hasn't got is not worth having. And what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. Lord, the times we've had together, whether in winter or summer, spring or autumn, it's always got its fun and excitements. When the floods are in February and the cellars and basements are brimming with drink, that's no good to me. And the brown waters run by my best bedroom window, or again when it all drops away and shows patches of mud that smell like plum cake, and the rushes and weed clog of the channels, and I smell and the potter about to dry shoot over the most of the bed of its
find fresh food to eat. And the things the careless people have dropped out of the boats.
But isn't it a bit dull at times? Mole ventured to ask. Just you and the river, no one else to pass the word with.
No one else to, well, I mustn't be hard on you,
said the rat, with forbearance.
You're new to it, and of course you don't know. The bank is so crowded nowadays that many people are moving away altogether. Oh no, it isn't what it used to be at all. Otters, kingfishers, dabchicks, moorhens, all of them. About all day long, and always wanting you to do something. As a fellow had no business of his own intend to.
What lies over there? Asked Mole, waving a paw towards a background of woodland. A darkly framed water meadow on one side of the river.
That? Oh, it's just the wild woods,
said the rat shortly.
We don't go there very much. We are riverbankers.
Aren't they nice people in there? Said the mole, in nervously.
Well,
replied the rat.
Let me see. The squirrels are all right, and the rabbits. Some of them, but rabbits are mixed a lot. And there's a badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it. Wouldn't live anywhere else. Either if you paid him to do it. Dear old badger. Nobody interferes with him. They better not.
He added significantly. Why? Who should interfere with him? Asked the mole.
Well, of course there are others,
explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way.
Weasels and the stoats and the foxes, so on and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them past the time of day when we meet and all that. But they break out sometimes. There's no denying it. And then, well, you can't really trust them. And that's a fact.
The mole knew well. It is quite against animal etiquette to dwell on possible trouble ahead, or even allude to it, so he dropped the subject. And beyond the wild woods again, he asked, where it's all blue and dim, and one sees what many be hills, or perhaps they ain't martin, and something like the smoke of the towns. Or is it a cloud drift?
Beyond the wild woods comes the wild world, said the rat. And that's something that doesn't matter either to you or me. I've never been there. I'm never going, nor you either. If you've got any sense at all, don't ever refer to it again. Please. Now then, here is our backwater at last, where we're going to lunch.
Leaving the main stream, they now passed onto what seemed at first a sight like a little landlocked gate. Green turf sloped down either edge. Brown, shaky tree roots gleamed below the surface of quiet water, while ahead of them, the slippery shoulder, a foamy tumble of a weir, arm in with Wrestle's dripping mill wheel that held up in its turn a grey garbled mill house, filled the air with a soothing murmur of sounds, dull and smoothery, yet with little clear voices up cheerfully out on the individuals. It was very so beautiful that the mole could only hold up both forepaws and gasp. Oh my, oh my, oh my. The rat brought the boat alongside the bank and made her fast, helped the still awkward mole safely ashore, and swung out the luncheon basket. The mole begged as a favour to allow him to unpack it by himself, and the rat was very pleased to indulge him. And the sprawl at the full length of grass, and the rest, while his excited friend shook out the tablecloth and spread it, took out the mysterious packet one by one, and arranged their contents in due order, still gasping, "Oh my! Oh my!" at each fresh revelation. When all was ready, the rat said, "Now pinch in, old fellow." And the mole, indeed, was very glad to obey, for he had started his spring cleaning at very early hour that morning, as people will do, and had not paused for a bite or sup. And he had been through a very great deal since that distant of time, which now seemed so many days ago. "What are you looking at?" said the rat presently, at the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander off the tablecloth a little. "I'm looking," said the mole, "at a streak of bubbles that I see travelling along the surface of the water. That is a thing that strikes me as funny." "Bubbles? Oh!" said the rat, chirruped cheerily in an inviting sort of way. A broad glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank. The otter hurled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy badgers," he observed for the ponder. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?"
"This was an important affair," explained the rat. "By the way, my friend, Mr. Mole."
"Proud, I'm sure." The other animals and the other two animals were friends for wit. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "All the world seems out of the river today. I came up this backwater to try and get a moment's peace, and then stumbled upon you fellows. At least I beg pardon. I don't exactly mean that, you know." There was a rustle behind them, proceeding from hedge wherein, and last year's leaves still clung thick, and a stripy head and shoulders behind it peered forth them.
Come on, old badger,
shouted the rat. The badger trotted in a pace and grunted, company, and turned back and disappeared from view.
That's just the sort of fellow he is,
observed the disappointed rat.
Simply hates society now. Now, we shan't see any more of him today. Well, to us, who's out on the river?
Toad. Out for one, replied Otter, in his brand new wager boat. New togs and everything. The two animals looked at each other and laughed.
Once, it was nothing but sailing, said the rat. Then he tired of that and took to punting. Nothing would please him but to punt all day and every day, and a nice mess he made of it. Last year, it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in his boathouse and pretended we liked it. He was going to spend the rest of his life in a boathouse. Houseboat. It was all the same. Whatever he takes up, he gets rid of it and starts somewhere fresh.
Such a good fellow, too, remarked Otter reflectively, but no stability, especially in a boat. From where they sat, they could glimpse the main stream across the island that separated them. Just then, a wager boat flashed into view, a rower and a stout figure, splashing badly and rolled a deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him, but Toad, for it was he, shook his head and settled sternly to his work.
He'll be out of the boat in a minute, if he rolls like that,
said the rat, sitting down again. Of course he will, chuckled the otter. Did I ever tell you that good story about the toad and the lockkeeper? It happened this way. Toad, an errant mayfly, swerved unsteadily athwart the current in the intoxicated fashion afflicted the young bloods of mayflies seeing life. A swirl and a cloop, and the mayfly was visible no more. Neither was Otter. The mole looked down. The voices were still in his ears, but the turf whereon he had sprawled was completely vacant. Not an otter to be seen, but as far as the distant horizon. But again, there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the river. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole recollected that animal etiquette forbade any sort of comment on this sudden disturbance of one's friend at any moment. For any reason, or no reason whatever.
Well, said the rat. I suppose we ought to be moving. I wonder which of us has better pack the luncheon basket.
He did not speak, as if he was frightfully eager for the treat. Oh, please, let me, said the mole, so of course the rat let him. Packing the basket was not such pleasant work as unpacking the basket. It never is, but the mole was bent on enjoying everything, and although just when he got the basket packed and stripped up tightly, he saw a plate staring up at him from the grass, and when the job had been done, the rat pointed a fork, which anybody ought to have seen on the last of all. Behold, the mustard pot, which he had been sitting on without knowing it. It still, somehow, the thing got finished at last, without much loss of temper. The afternoon sun was getting low as Rat sculled gently homewards, in a dreamy mood, muttering poetry things over to himself, and not paying much attention to Mole. But Mole was very full of lunch and self-satisfaction, and Pride was already quite at home in a boat, so he thought, and was getting a bit restless besides. Presently he said, "Ratty, please, I want to row now." The rat shook his head with a smile. "Not yet, my young friend," he said. "Wait till you had a few lessons. It's not as easy as it looks." The mole was quiet for a minute or two, but began to feel more and more jealous of Rat, scurrying so strongly and so easily along. His pride began to whisper that he could do it every bit as well. He jumped up and seized the sculls so suddenly, and that the rat was gazing out over the river, saying more poetry things to himself, was taken by surprise and fell backwards off his seat, with his legs in the air for a second time. The mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with entire confidence. "Stop it, you silly ass!" cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. "You can't do it. You'll have us over." The mole flung his sculls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether. His legs flew up above the head, and he found himself lying on top of the prostrate rat, greatly alarmed to make a grab on the other side of the boat. The next moment, sploosh! Over went the boat. He found himself struggling in the river. Oh my! How cold the water was, and oh, how very wet it felt. How it sang in his ears as he went down, down, down. How bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering. How back was his despair when he felt himself sinking again, the firm paw gripped by the back of his neck. It was Rat, and he was evidently laughing. The mole could feel him laughing right down his arm, through his paw into the mole's neck. The rat got hold of the skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, swimming behind and propelled his helpless animal to shore and hurled him out and set him down the bank in a pulpy lump of misery. When the rat had rubbed him down a bit and wrung some of the wet towing path, wrung him out, he said, "Now then, old fellow, trot up and down the towing path as hard as you can, till you're warm and dry again, while I drive for the luncheon basket." So, the dimsel mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted till he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged in the water again and recovered the boat, righted her, and made her fast and fetched her floating property to the shore by degrees, and finally divided successfully for the luncheon basket and struggled to land with it. When all was ready to start once more, the mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat, and they were ready to set off. And he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, "Ratty, my generous friend, I am very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I have been a complete ass, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once and forgive me, and let things go as it was before?"
"Ah, that's all right, bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm sure I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it? And look here, I really think you had better come and stop with me a little for a time. It's very plain and rough, you know, not like Toad's house at all. But you haven't seen that yet. Still, I can make you comfortable, and I can teach you to row and to swim, and you'll soon be as handy on the water as any of us."
The mole was so touched by this kind manner of speaking that he could find no voice to answer him, and he had to brush away a tear or two with the back of his paw. But the rat kindly looked in another direction. Presently the mole's spirit revived again. He was even able to give some straight back talk to a couple of moorhens who were sniggering to each other about the bedraggled appearance when they got home. The rat made a bright fire in the parlour, and planted the mole in the armchair of it, having fetched down a dressing gown and slippers for him, and told him river stories till supper time. Very thrilling stories they were, too. To an earthly dwelling animal like mole, stories about wares and sudden floods and leaping pike and streams and flung hard bottles. At least bottles were certainly flung from streamers, but presumably by them, and about the herons and how particular they are to whom they spoke to, and the adventures down drains, the night fishing with otter, excursions on the far afield with badger. Supper was a most cheerful meal, but very shortly afterwards, a terrible sleepy mole had escorted upstairs by the considerate host to the best bedroom, where he soon laid his head on his pillow, the great peace and contentment, knowing that his newfound friend, the river, was lapping still of his window. This day was the first of many similar ones in Patchmented Mole, each of them longer and full of interest. As the rippling summer moved onwards, he learnt to swim and row and entered into joy of running water. And he was his ear to the reed seams, caught at intervals, something of what the wind went whispering constantly among them. End of chapter.